How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Mountain Movement. We have a very special guest today. He is a dear friend of mine. He probably won't tell you that, but he's near and dear to my heart. He is one of the guys that have gotten me started in my faith journey. So we wanted to bring him on and kind of get his life story. So welcome, Rick.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Rick is a business consultant. Is that what you would call it?
Yeah, business consultant and coach.
Okay, coach.
Yeah.
We use the term coach liberally. I would consider him more of a consultant more than a coach.
Mm-hmm.
Rick owns a company called Up Advisors. So if you're in the market, check them out. They're the bee's knees. So Rick, tell us about you. Who is Rick English?
Oh, goodness. So I grew up in Seattle, Washington, proper.
It was better back then. I mean,
Yeah. It was a lot different back then. North of the city, near a place that's near and dear to my heart, which is a place called Dick's Drive-In. So
Dick's Drive-In?
Dick's Drive-In, yeah.
Is that a movie theater or a
No,
hamburger place?
It's a hamburger place.
Okay.
Just complete drive up, chrome counters, cheap cheeseburgers. Anyways, so yeah, I grew up in Seattle. One sister, a couple of years older. Parents, both my parents for all my growing up years. Although that was a little bumpy. Grew up with a dad who was an alcoholic, and he created some havoc for a lot of years, which ties in pretty significantly into the faith journey. And but into sports, all that.
What sports?
Baseball, basketball was my main sport. Played baseball for a few years, then retired from Little League. Tried to actually make a comeback about a year later and pitch off of a mound, which was quite the experience.
So you knew when to let go.
I knew when to let go.
Good for you.
Yeah, I played basketball, but I'm 5'8". I graduated high school. I weighed 145 pounds. So being able to play in high school wasn't really an option. I wasn't more interested. Turned out in making money actually. So I had a paper route from early age. Started mowing lawns when I was 8, and then
Does it snow in Seattle?
It does occasionally, yeah. So you might get snow, a little bit of snow every winter. Usually not enough to sled down the hill that was right by my house, but we had some winters where there was pretty active sledding. But generally speaking, it's mostly just rain and a lot of gray sky.
It's about
Nice.
what you hear then. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. What? Okay, so take a step back as far as like the childhood, as far as your faith journey, right? You mentioned your father being an alcoholic, and that played a lot of role into. And I know part of your story with you growing up in the church with your mother. Kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah. So my mom and dad got married when they were 19, and my dad ended up going into. He enlisted in the Marine Corps rather than being drafted by the Army into Vietnam. So they let him make the choice. So because of that, my parents ended up getting married. My dad had started drinking like at 13. His mom died young, and so neither one of my parents were people of faith. And my dad died pretty young, so he didn't have any parents. And anyways, so my mom, when I was 3, so I was born. They got married in '66. I was born in '72, so like 1975. My mom was working in a fabric store, and the manager was a Christian. Her best friend was working there. She was a Christian, and my mom was really afraid of dying, and so that created an opportunity for them to witness to her, tell them about Jesus and salvation.
Was there? Did you before she passed? Did she ever like elaborate on what she was like? She was afraid of dying.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know that we ever got that deep. I just think she was afraid to die and, not know what was going to happen.
Right.
I think is ultimately
the uncertainty.
Yeah. So she gave her life to Christ and just started on a faith journey. And, I was 3 years old. I was, she would told me what happened. I remember praying with her when I was young. But, and from there, she taught us to memorize scripture. So we had, call them tag board type things. It's like a cardboardy like material, but thinner. And she would wrote out all the verses, and every night before we went to bed, we'd pray, do a devotional, and we'd work on our scripture verses. And I still
remember some of those?
I do. I remember some. Yeah. One of the big ones was the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. And that one, that one stuck with me for years.
Why?
I think just because, anytime I get angry, my mom would say to me, hey, remember that verse? The anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. And also, be slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to become angry. It's and I think part of that probably stemmed from some of the stuff that was going on, particularly as we got older, because, my dad got to the point where he would get drunk. He'd get drunk a lot on the weekends. He'd go drink sometimes during the week at the tavern, but he'd get drunk on the weekends. He'd spend all day.
Was that next to Dick's?
No. No, it was down the street from Dick's, though. Dick's was on Holman Road up here. You go down Holman Road, and there was a tavern called the Coachman where he hung out. And then, but yeah, so, I think that there was some anger that came with that because my mom would get fed up with my dad, and then we'd leave for a week.
Did he ever deploy to Vietnam?
Yeah.
And was that kind of during the time that your mom?
Born.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was before I was born, because he was there. And
yeah, I think the height of it was 69 to 72-ish.
Because he would have gone, and they got married in March, so he had to go March of '66. So he would have been gone. He was there at 66. His brother actually, he had two brothers. One was in the Air Force, a pilot, and the other was in the Navy. And the one in the Navy, I guess, had already kind of gotten out, but But his brother, there was a rule there's a rule now. I don't know if the rule was back then that you couldn't have all the family members in the military.
Yeah, have you ever seen Saving Private Ryan?
Yeah, no, I never actually
watched
that movie.
Great movie.
Yeah, but so he ended up getting him out. His older brother wrote a few letters to get him out. But yeah, so we ended up moving out. We'd go stay with one of my mom's friends or go stay with somebody from church. And the longest we ever left for was about 3 weeks. And then my mom would come back, they'd figure it out, whatever. And it was just this cycle. So through that, there was a lot of frustration and irritation. But yeah.
What was it? When obviously him being drunk, what are we talking? Did anything get physical? Was it verbal abuse? What were you experiencing, especially as a kid developing and just seeing these kinds of things?
Yeah. Not a lot of physical abuse. It was definitely just yelling and screaming. He'd get mad and want her to call in sick for him. And one time she got fed up with it, and he pushed her. I didn't see it happen, but he pushed her in the kitchen, and she fell against the wall, and there was a big dent in the drywall, so it didn't totally break the drywall, but it pushed it in. And so they ultimately I still can't believe they did this, but for years we had they put the sticky wallpaper up to cover, and they just went right over that section, but they never fixed the wall behind it. So you knew, it was like this permanent reminder of that whole situation. One time she wouldn't call, and he broke the bathroom door because she was hiding in the bathroom. He got drunk one time and thought we lived in a small house, and you walked into the hallway, and my bedroom was on the left, my sister's bedroom was kind of just in the corner, and then the bathroom, and then my parents' bedroom. So he, instead of walking to the bathroom, he walked into my bedroom and thought that was the bathroom. So he peed on my floor. And it was you wake up and you're like, what the heck is going on? But But a lot more emotional stuff. And, we ended up doing an intervention, just my mom and my sister and I, and a counselor when I was 11, to basically push him into treatment. He went, but he wasn't committed. So then he just started really trying to hide it. So there's confrontations and stuff like that about hiding the alcohol. And I remember when as I got older, when I was 17, my mom went to Hawaii, and we really hadn't caught him getting drunk. We knew he was drinking, and he came home, and I'm doing homework in my bedroom, and I can hear banging on the walls, like somebody's walking down the hall and running into the wall every 4 or 5 steps. And and I got out like, what's going on? He's like, I looked at him, I said, "You're drunk." And he goes, "You're not going to tell your mom." And I said, "I'll tell her whatever I want to tell her." And he goes, he's like threatening me. And I like.
You're how old?
I was 17 at that point.
Okay, so you're a little bit older.
Yeah, and I was ready. If I probably could have just pushed him over because he was so drunk. But like, what's he gonna do at that point? And so, So it was
were you fully involved with the church at that point?
Yeah. So I started going to church when I was like 2 years old, because my I had a sister who was 2 years older. My mom was, I don't know what the deal was. Like we would just go up to this church that was just like a block and a half away. I mean, it's different times. I would go out at 8 years old knocking on doors to mow lawns. So you didn't worry as much about it. But we started going then. And then when my mom became a Christian, there was a church, a Nazarene church. It was called Crown Hill Nazarene. Crown Hill was kind of the neighborhood that I guess technically we lived in. And so we started going to Crown Hill Nazarene. And then that was kind of the beginning, and 3 years old.
So I'm just out of curiosity. So I went to Northwest Nazarene University.
Yeah.
And I had heard certain things, just like most churches, they've evolved over time.
Yeah.
Was it pretty strict on certain things at that time with like dancing or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah, the whole dancing thing was definitely there.
Explain the dancing thing to me.
They're just like, no dancing. They believe that
Oh, you're just not allowed to dance?
Christians don't dance.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. They had a whole book of things that you weren't supposed to do, but I never saw it actually. And so, but yeah, so dancing, I think like movies, like rated R movies and that sort of thing. But my mom followed some of that stuff, but, I didn't really associate any of the limitations that she put on us with specifically the Nazarene Church. But yeah, they definitely had a reputation for that. Yeah.
So then, did your sister continue on her faith journey, I guess?
Yeah. So we both did. She ended up marrying a guy. That's a long story. That's a whole podcast in itself, actually.
Okay. We'll schedule another
probably
one.
2. She ended up getting married. She continued her faith journey, and then she got married to a guy who originally was working in like software, business software, and then ended up becoming a youth pastor. So she sang for, she would do solos, and that's back when you don't see so many solos in churches anymore, but it used to be very common for there to be a solo every week. You might have a choir, so she would sing solos, and then ultimately got into like worship team sort of stuff, and would lead worship, and and then she ended up getting divorced, and like it was really ugly, messy.
Next podcast.
The next podcast,
yeah, we'll get there.
But she's actually been away. She's not been, attending church or just living out faith in Christ and everything she learned and knows. But it's interesting because I was in Washington a couple weeks ago seeing my dad, and they bought a place in Tennessee that they intend to retire. Moved from Washington to Tennessee and retire there.
Oh, your dad?
My sister.
Oh, okay.
And so she actually came down to visit, and she said she found a church that she's going to go to, and I was like, wow. I don't even know how it came up. I don't remember how it came up. I think I was just so stunned that she said that, because she's just kind of, she she really went away. Her and my mom had a kind of a tumultuous, well, her and my mom and dad actually had a pretty tumultuous relationship, and driven largely by the alcohol, but then it just kind of progressed over time to some other stuff. So
you're 17, you graduate high school, I hope?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then college?
Yeah, so went to junior college for a couple of years because Pops told me he was going to pay for half of my school. And that meant I'm not paying to go to the University of Washington.
So did you go, was it a junior college in Seattle?
Yeah. Actually, they were called community colleges. So I went to North Seattle Community College for 2 years. They had a really kind of clear transfer program. Thought I wanted to be an engineer. Decided after the beginning of the second quarter that was not meant for me. Second year calculus. I'm like, this sucks. I don't like this. And all these other guys seem to like it. So I'm out. I went down, changed my major to business, went through the transfer process, and then went to the University of Washington for 2 years and graduated with a degree in business.
You said that you liked making money or something as a kid, right?
Yeah.
You kind of started the entrepreneurial business side of it when you were young then.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you don't always think about how you grew up and what you did. But yeah, I was very interested in making money. I had the lawn mowing business. I had the paper route, and then ultimately I got a second paper route, or a new paper route. So I had just like a weekly paper. So I delivered that for like 4 years, and then while I was on the weekly route, a guy from the Seattle Times was driving a red Corvette, where he had a lanyard on that said Seattle Times. I probably shouldn't have sat in his car. He looked legit. He didn't look like an expert or anything.
Yeah.
So he's like, "Hey, you interested in the Seattle Times?" He says, "Have a seat or whatever." Like my parents probably would have freaked. Nowadays, like you would like, it just wouldn't happen. But he was, I felt like I was safe. It didn't seem like he was kind of weird or trying to abduct me or something. And if he did, I would have gone bonkers on him in the car. So. But I ended up getting a Seattle Times route,
and was that just because you wanted the money?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Thinking back then, I think I was going to make more money, right. And it was going to, and then that just progressed. I had one paper route, and there were like 3 routes, and my house was actually in the middle. My route was like to the south, and then I ended up getting all of them. And did that for 9 months, my junior year of high school. But yeah, it was just, and then I was still mowing lawns and.
During college, what did you do? Did you work during college?
Well, so the paper route got to the point where I was sick of it because I was delivering every day. I'd get up at 4 a.m. Probably get up at like 6 on Saturday, 5:36, go deliver, and then I had 180 papers I delivered on my bike, and I had the route. You kind of learn, you kind of realize how process driven you are and some of the other stuff around business, because I had flat papers, I had folded papers, I had to stuff the papers, and then I had to figure out the most efficient way to deliver those papers. And so I had the route all designed out. I knew how many flats, I knew how many rolled, and then I would just hit this cycle. But Sundays, I had 210 papers to deliver. And I had to walk because the papers, are,
right.
inch and a half, 2 inches thick. And I had a cart. It was, yeah. And
you look like a homeless kid pushing a cart down the sidewalk.
I could. Well, and then, I'm in Seattle. I felt like 50% of the time it rained on Sunday. So then I got to have a plastic bag over my cart. It was a 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. deal every Sunday.
How much did you get paid?
I was trying to remember exactly. I was making about $700 a month at the end, which at the time was pretty darn ridiculous. So for those 9 months, I was making good money with tips and everything. It was just, there was a lady who would sub for me when I needed a sub, and then she said, "I'm not subbing for you anymore because I don't want to deliver all these papers." So then you're just basically I was imprisoned. I was jailed to my paper route, And so I told him I was out. Turns out I wasn't supposed to have all 3 routes anyways, because that made it an adult route, and I wasn't an adult, but the manager's the one who let it happen. I was actually, the best part is I was getting paid to manage a shack. So I would go to a paper shack. It had 2 outside areas and then inside. So I was getting paid to manage the shack as part of it. I think they were paying me $50 or $60 a month to manage myself. That was awesome.
Nice.
I loved it. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you end up paying for college?
Yeah, so I saved a bunch of money. I met a gal when I was 17. So I paid for a lot of dates, so that consumed a little bit. But I had savings. There's a whole story about my first car, but that I saved a bunch of money. My dad actually helped me by getting a different car because I would have spent a bunch of the money on the car. So I had savings from that. And then my senior year, because I didn't want to do the paper route, I took the summer off. I did 3 months with a janitorial service, and then I got a job. One of my best friends worked at a wholesale greenhouse, and so he's like, "Hey, you want to come work?" So I ended up going to work there. Worked my senior year, and then the first 3 years of college at the greenhouse. So I'd work part-time during the week, and then I'd work full-time, typically on breaks unless I was going somewhere, and then full-time during the summer. And then one of my cousins worked for Safeway, and he was good friends with this Tim's Cascade Chips guy. He's like, "Hey, do you want to cover like these 11 stores on the weekends?" So every Friday night, I'd roll out around 10 o'clock, and I'd hit 11 QFCs, Safeways. He'd leave boxes of chips.
You're good.
Yeah, you're good.
Did I hit the right spot?
Yeah.
You're good.
He'd leave boxes. See, I knew it was going to happen. He leaves boxes of these chips in the back. So I'd go to the back, and I didn't have like a Tim's Cascade shirt or anything because he wasn't an employee. He was a distributor. And I'd be climbing up trying to find the boxes, and then I'd go take them out, put them, stock the shelves, take the boxes, and then he paid me like $30 a week to do it. And I did that from, I think, 16 or 17 all through college. So it was a way to just make extra money. Still had like a lawn that I mowed for one lady.
And then after college, what did you end up doing?
After college, it was a little bit of a journey. So I took a job with a life insurance company. After 2 weeks, I quit. I was like, these guys are unethical. I'm not going to do that. And then
Haven't you seen TikTok though?
TikTok?
Yeah. You haven't learned about life insurance via TikTok?
No.
Oh. you got to.
Yeah,
Scott has.
Scott clearly has. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a really interesting conversation a couple weeks ago with the client about whole life insurance, but another topic. But so I ended up. I had another job opportunity that came along after I quit the life insurance. Actually, took the summer off. And then started looking. This was back when you either went to the career center where they had paper posted on the wall, or you looked in the newspaper. And so through the career center at the University of Washington, some opportunities were there. Took one job, but I'd interviewed for another one, and then they came back and offered me a job. And it was just kind of it was in sales. The first job was in sales. I wasn't so sure about my ability to sell at that time, and so I took this job in insurance claims because I had dated a gal for 5.5 years, broke up in that summer of '94, right after we both graduated from the University of Washington. And then I met my now wife in September, so about 3-4 weeks later. And so I was ready to get engaged, but I told her I'm not getting engaged to have a job. So I had the job, and then this other one came along.
Shout out to Heather.
Yeah. Yeah, so ended up getting in insurance claims, and the first day I walked in, the office was just kind of the north end of downtown Seattle, and the kitchen area, it was a big kitchen area, had a panoramic view of Puget Sound. Really wild. I have no idea. I mean, it was nice of them to put the kitchen there, but most people wouldn't put a kitchen with this sort of view. And I remember walking in, these guys were like, "Hey, where'd you get your degree in insurance from?" So it was this big joke because nobody gets a degree in insurance. So I ended up working for Kemper Insurance. Was my first what I would call my first job.
Are they still around?
They're around in name, but the company went under. Yeah. They actually had a lot of asbestos exposure, so environmental liability, pollution and such. And so I don't know why they took on, I mean, it's just that they've been around at that point for probably like 80 years. So they ended up selling surplus. It was a big mess. And so they got broken up. And there is a Kemper still out there. It's owned by a company called Unitron, but yeah. And then went to Travelers Insurance after that. When things started going downhill, they weren't promoting people anymore. So I kind of got to the max I was going to get to, and so I started applying for other jobs. And every time I applied for a job, they would be posted, but then they'd say, "Oh yeah, we decided not to fill it because we didn't have the money." And
explain like the downhill part.
Yeah, so with all these liabilities, they had
as far as the asbestos.
Yeah, that and I think they had some poor leadership too. I mean, there was a guy who ran Kemper Funds. There used to be a Kemper Investments. I don't know who bought them, but so they had this Kemper Fund, mutual funds. Well, the guy who ran that into the ground, for some reason they decided to make him the CEO of Kemper Insurance. I'm like, I'm just out of business school. Why does this make any sense?
Feels like common sense, but maybe not.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure there was more to the story that I didn't see, but it didn't make any sense to me. And so, but yeah, they sold surplus notes. So they basically selling like the equivalent to bonds against their surplus because insurance companies are required to keep a surplus. So I'm like, man, I don't remember reading about surplus notes in all this insurance education I got after I went to work at Kemper because they were big on education, and so I was like, this strange. This doesn't sound too good. And then when they wouldn't hire people, I'm like, I gave them they asked me for a 3-year commitment. I didn't have a signed contract. It was just 3-year commitment. So 3 years and 3 months, they started laying people off. And like, everybody got called into the conference room with the HR person, and I survived. I'm like, I'm out. Yep. And so I went to the newspaper of all places because that's where we found jobs, and found a job at Kemper Insurance or at Travelers Insurance, and started there, and then got into management for the first time at Travelers.
And what were you doing at Travelers when you first started?
I was still doing claims, so I was doing auto and general liability.
Did you have like a big stamp where it was a big red denied stamp?
No. No, it's so funny.
The Invincibles,
the Incredibles.
The Incredibles, yeah. Big stamp, denied. Yeah, that's the funny thing about insurance, and I think it's gotten maybe a little bit worse in their certain pockets, but like we legitimately did look for coverage. At least that's how I was trained. The fact is it's a contract, and if it's not covered, it's not covered.
Well, and on the other side too, right? If you're not fulfilling your side of the contract as well.
Exactly.
Seeing a lot of that right now.
Yeah.
Especially down south.
Yeah. Yeah. Florida's really bad right now. The insurance companies are doing some shady stuff, but all the big players are out of Florida because nobody wants to write. But yeah, so I mean, I learned a ton. I spent a bunch of time outside of work doing the education stuff. So like getting certifications and that sort of thing. They didn't pay you for it, but it was super helpful. And then Travelers Insurance, it felt like first year maybe first year and a half was good. Maybe 2 years. And then every 6 months they're eliminating the personal insurance department, which we ended up like 100 and some people from not that many when I first went to work there. And then they eliminated the property first, actually. Then they eliminated the personal insurance. I'm like, shoot, this is just a matter of time. And then one day they came to us and said, hey, we're closing the whole office except for the property guys are going to be here in the underwriting, but the whole claim's just being shut down.
Was that the office that you were in, was that a corporate office? My understanding, right, is you have Travelers as a whole, and then you have essentially the agents that own their own agency that are selling Travelers specific policies, correct?
Yeah.
So were you in, I guess, like an agency, or were you in like kind of the corporate?
No. Well, it was a corporate office, but it wasn't the corporate office. So Travelers was headquartered in Connecticut.
Okay.
And so they had claims offices and underwriting offices all over the country.
Okay.
Yeah. So this was a claims and underwriting office, downtown Seattle, and
so when they came to you and they were like, "Yeah, we're gonna shut this down," you went to management.
Well, I was already a supervisor. They call them unit managers at the time, and so I had a choice of either moving to Northern California, like Sacramento area, Rancho Cordova, or Oregon, just outside Portland. I can't think of the town right now, but I'm like, I'm not moving for these guys. Every 6 months, something happens. Someone moved my family somewhere, and then they're gonna say, "Oh, we decided to close this office."
Did you have kids at this point?
Yeah, at that point in time. So that was 2002. So
Brady.
I had Natalie, and Brady came in 2003. So we just had the one at the time, but Heather was staying home. She'd actually been home at that point for like 2.5 years probably, and so no, so about a year, about a year at that point.
And were you like continuously going to church and doing,
through my college years, I was really close with the Lord, and I do Bible study every day. Just kind of go through, book of the Bible, verse by verse, and that was probably my strongest time of faith. Got into the work world, was good the early years, got into management, not at Travelers, but...
That was my next question, was like, okay, in my head I picture, and especially with me, I get into this like, it's not necessarily a mundane habit, but like, you go to work, you go home, you go to church.
Yeah.
You go to work, you go home, you go to church.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how did you maintain like that strong faith and not necessarily excitement, but like, how can you be so diligent all the time, right?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I wasn't. I was always faithful in going to church, and I was faithful in being an example, so I'm not a cusser. Never was. And that was definitely an example to people. People would recognize it. And generally not cuss around me or apologize when they did. And so, there was that. And there, there's, and you look for opportunities to share your faith, but it's, like in the work setting, like once I became a manager, I felt like it was harder because now...
Well, it's not necessarily a place.
Yeah. Sometimes people create the opportunities,
right, yeah.
And I would definitely take advantage of the opportunities to where when that opportunity was presented to, share my experience with God and where I find faith, where I find support in challenging times. But I didn't get in on the insurance brokerage side, and that was really it was a different world because now I'm on the sales side. But
and that's after you left Travelers.
Yeah, so Travelers, I took a job for a minute in property estimating. I was going to had to get out of management. But then an opportunity came up on the brokerage side, which was, quite frankly, was really life-changing.
Was that local to Seattle?
Yeah. Well, it was in Bellevue, which is across Lake Washington. So yeah, I ended up getting a job with Arthur J. Gallagher, which is now they're probably one of their top 5 biggest brokers in the world. At the time they were too, and there's a regional office for them, but. Got on initially in claims and was kind of crushing it, not to brag about myself, but I was crushing it, particularly on the largest account that had a couple of fires and, $1 million+ fires. And I was all over the insurance companies and, kind of managing it. And through that process, one of the ladies decided to leave. There's kind of some history there between her and the president. And they asked me if I wanted to, they just one day offered me this job. Like a $20,000 pay raise, or 20, was it something like that? Maybe it was a $26,000 pay raise. It was like a $26,000 pay raise. I think I was making about $62,000 at the time. And they offered me a $26,000 pay raise. But now I'm going to have responsibility for everybody in the office except the salespeople. And I've been on the brokerage side of the business for like 6 months. I knew insurance. I didn't know insurance brokerage. So I didn't know the sales side.
Right.
I wasn't going to have to manage sales. So really just got into the fire. And that was actually kind of, for me, the beginning of a journey of kind of ups and downs faith-wise, because I went from pretty much getting there at 8-ish and then leaving at 4:30-ish, half-hour lunch or whatever, 5 maybe, to now I got all this responsibility. And even in the claim side, like working for the insurance companies, it wasn't like crazy hours. But now I'm in the soup because I have to replace myself, but I need to take on the responsibilities of this job. So I get a temp to help who didn't know diddly about insurance claims. So I'm still having to manage this stuff. Fortunately, I'm able to hire a guy. Crazy thing is, like, he's still there all these years later. That was 2003. He's been with the company for 22 years. I just marvel about that. So that ultimately helped me. But they were in the middle of an acquisition. I just hit this thing again.
So you could bring this a little lower if you want to. If maybe I don't know if that'll make it worse or better.
But then our number one producer decided to leave and try to steal all of the clients. It's like $2 million in revenue, and we got zero support from this big insurance brokerage firm. And I'm like, well, I know litigation because I spent a lot of time in claims, and so we ended up getting a lawyer, a really good lawyer, and but then the president of the office, I don't know, it was probably like 4 months in, found out she had a hole in her heart, a congenital defect, so she was like, her heart was working too hard, so she ended up fainting after a meeting that we had. And then we were doing this acquisition that we should have never done, and there was this big to-do between the Tacoma office and the Bellevue office. So now and then we're expanding. We're taking on more space. I'd never taken on anything with that. We're taking on more space, so you got to figure out all the furniture, figure out how to merge these people into our office who didn't want to be with us. It was just an absolute. So I'm working 12, 13 hours a day now. And where's the time for God in that? And that kind of started I did that for 2 years just in the fire. So I was at Gallagher for about 2.5, and I was recruited away on an airplane. Well, it started with an airplane, actually, and ended up going to work for Hub International. And initially that was better, and then we started doing acquisitions. And we did 6 acquisitions during the time I was there, and I was responsible for assimilating these people into the business and dealing with space and all kinds of stuff, HR, and it was crazy. So I was working a lot. And so my faith was kind of up and down. Like, I'd have times where felt like I was close. I was consistent in prayer and consistent in studying the Word and all of that. And we were in home fellowship groups with our church, the churches that we went to, and that was super helpful because that's that community that comes with being part of a church. I think if you don't get involved with the church, you're missing out on being part of the body. But that was helpful. And then, fast forward, I ultimately, I was at Hub for almost 7 years. And
was that in Seattle?
That was in Bothell, so north of Seattle.
Okay.
So it was Seattle, Bellevue, Bothell.
And kind of tell me the story about recruited on an airplane.
Oh, so we flew back.
You can't just skip over that.
Well, it ended up being recruited on an airplane in effect, because it would have been 2004, I guess. So
those are some pretty testy times on airplanes.
Yeah. So middle of 2004, probably June-ish or something. Gallagher had this policy that if you managed more than 2 people, you had to go to this mandatory training in Itasca, which is outside Chicago. So you drive outside Chicago, and there's this weird, just kind of high-rise building out in the middle of kind of nowhere-ish. It was really odd, but that was their corporate headquarters. So you go back there, you meet Patrick Gallagher, who's the grandson of the founder, and he, is pumping you up, telling you how awesome Gallagher is.
Did he ask you if you have 5 friends that would like this opportunity?
No. But so I ended up going to, this was for me, it was definitely a God thing. I had heard about this book called Good to Great. Jim Collins.
I just started that.
Did you? Yeah. So Jim Collins, I don't know what it looks like today. Probably the same. It has a bright orange cover. Does it still have a bright orange cover? Right. Do they sell it now? So they actually have a cover. It was a hardcover book. Well, we went to this mall. They just dropped us off. The hotel dropped us off there, and I think we had dinner together as a group. There's a bunch of us, and I went to this bookstore because I wanted to get something for my daughter, and then I also wanted to see. I'd heard about this book, Good to Great, and
it's red,
reddish orange. Yeah, I don't know.
Thanks for confirming.
Yeah, close. So close enough. Anyways, so I had to walk a long ways to this bookstore. I left everybody, and I ended up getting Good to Great, and I got a kid's book to read to Natalie. And so I'm on the airplane flying back, and I just, got the book out and reading it, and I'm in the window, the guy in the aisle, big guy, older big guy, and the guy in the middle gets up to go to the bathroom. So the guy in the aisle's like, "Hey, what do you think of that book?" Because it obviously got this bright cover. And I said, "Well, I just got started on it." He goes, "Oh, it's a good book. I was just back at our corporate headquarters." He'd been at Hub International's corporate headquarters for a meeting. And he goes, "Yeah, we read that book and discussed it. We read it in advance and discussed it." And he goes, "What do you do?" So he's like, "Well, I'm an insurance brokerage. I work for Arthur J. Gallagher." He goes, "Oh, I work for Bush Cotton and Scott." Well, I knew Bush Cotton and Scott because they were an agent of ours. Talk about the agency thing. They were an agent of ours when I was at Travelers, and I'd gone out with the manager of our whole claims office and visited a number of these agents. And
that's a heck of a name, by the way.
Bush Cotton and Scott? Yeah. Sounds like a law firm or accounting firm, not necessarily an insurance agency. And so he's like, "Do you got a business card on you?" Well, I mean, I wasn't in sales. I didn't carry business cards around with me, really. And so I don't have one right now, but he gave me one of his. Well, he looked me up. 3 weeks later, I get a call. It was 2 weeks later. I get a call, and he's like, "Hey, you open to having lunch?" I said, "Sure." And I was like burnt out. Like it had just been the learning through fire, dealing through fire, fighting fires. The people the acquisition we did, they were a nightmare, absolute nightmare. They should have merged with the Tacoma office, not us. They were just cowboys. Oh, it was an absolute just train wreck. I learned so much though through that time. Like, you could people like, did you get go get an MBA or whatever? I was getting an MBA, just working, and so so I ended up meeting with Steve Bush and Mike Murphy. Mike Murphy was a partner because the Bush Cotton and Scott thing, they had sold it, and then 2 of the guys bought it back, brought in 3 other partners. So it would have been 5 names. It was way too long. And then they ultimately sold it to Hub International. And so they recruited me to come and be essentially the successor to the guy who was sitting in the aisle on the airplane.
Wow.
And he was going to be out in a couple of years. And so I was a area VP of ops for Gallagher, took a director of ops and HR role, which is pretty much just a lateral move, knowing that I'd be able to become the COO. And so, yeah.
Did you recognize at the time, like, oh man, God's timing?
Yeah.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah. There's a little bit more to that story that I won't share on the podcast. I'm happy to share it with you offline. But that was absolutely God doing that. I shared this with a client of mine a couple weeks ago. But yeah, it was just definitely God was working in that situation. I wouldn't say that I felt that always with jobs, but because fast forward almost 7 years, there was some stuff that was going on at Hub, and they had decided a new guy, I'd convinced him to take the president role because Steve Bush, who was the Bush and Bush cut, and Scott was just going to step into a chairman role, didn't want to run the day-to-day. And so I'd convinced this guy to take on the president role. Well, he comes in, and crazy enough, now that I'm a consultant, he hired a consultant who told him, you need to. So by that time, I'd been promoted to COO, and we brought in a CFO because we were growing. We were doing these acquisitions.
When was your move to San Francisco?
That was moved to San Francisco was in end of 2011.
And was that with the same company?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Yeah. Anyway, so I convinced this guy, and then he hires a consultant. The consultant says, you need to merge this back together and have a COO CFO, which was really, really dumb. There was no reason to do it. So he asked me to take on a chief sales officer role because our chief sales officer wasn't performing. And I had a bunch of ideas and had helped drive some sales stuff. But I was like, I started looking for a job. And ultimately, there was this relationship thing that happened, inappropriate relationship thing that happened between a couple people in leadership, one in leadership, and then they asked me, I think they were hiding something ultimately. And so they said they were eliminating the chief sales officer role, which made no sense, but they just wanted me to get out because they knew that I had the sort of integrity that I would, if I knew, and I realized this later. It didn't hit me right away. I just came in one Monday and they're like, hey, yeah, we decided to eliminate the chief sales officer role. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And then it hit me that Friday I'd asked to see the financials and they wouldn't share them with me. And the June financials, June financials. So I got a severance. I'd already started looking for a job. I was working actually with a career consultant guy that was really good. Just taught you how to market yourself and to be positive about the job change versus a lot of people are negative about it. And, it was just a time for my faith to grow because that was the first time since 1995 that I'd been out of a job. I was close with the travelers thing, but I got a job. I'd never been unemployed. And so, I just prayed for God's guidance. I was already working with like a business an executive sort of coach, in addition to the employment guy. In fact, he introduced me to the kind of the job search guy. And I think it was interesting. I'll always remember this, that the business coach guy, this opportunity came up in California. I had a couple opportunities in Washington. One was with like AAA insurance, or AAA. They had an insurance arm. A little different than here, but I remember talking to this guy. It's like, it's always like, how do you know what God's will is? Because it's not always like clear. It's not like you write something on the wall, or you see in biblical times where they'd hear a voice and they'd like go here, the burning bush. All these different things. Like it's not always just clear. And he said to me, he says, you know what, Rick, God's going to use you wherever you go. Doesn't matter. Wherever you go, he will use you. As long as you're following him and you're trusting him, he'll use you. Because I think sometimes in church and in Christians we'll be like, oh, I'm waiting for God's direction. Well, you should absolutely be praying for God's direction, but you could spend years waiting for his direction and that clarity, or that the burning bush, or an audible voice, or something.
That's something that, as you've been talking, I've wanted to ask, is like because you've made a lot of movements up to this point in your life, and
he doesn't stick around to a job.
Actually, I was there. I was 4.5 years.
That makes me
7 years.
Every time, if there's any big thing in my life, like a moving a career or moving to a different company, whatever, it always seems like a matter of prayer, obviously, for me. And I think you've brought up already a couple good points. Has that been a process for you every time you've moved, where you and your wife have got together and made it a matter of prayer? And
yeah, I think prayer's been an interesting topic with my wife. It's funny you bring that up because we actually just had a conversation on Friday about it that I think will change the future versus the past. But yeah, we would pray about it. We more probably pray individually, sometimes together. we'd also just talk through it because she didn't want to move to California. That was the next deal. It was like a California thing, but and that was really where I was talking with him, this kind of executive coach about, moving. He's like, God will use you. And so we agreed. We always agreed too. My wife has always been pretty submissive, but I always wanted her, it's never like, I'm going, just follow me. It's like, we always work together.
It should be a collective decision.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so, so we ended up moving to California. I took a job with a company at the time it was called International Pro Insurance. They had 2 different business units that were common ownership, but not equal ownership.
I have a question real quick. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
Do you have to be international to use the name International?
Well, it turns out that I guess in California, you couldn't use the term pro insurance. There had to be something in front of it. Oh. So even though they were not even remotely international, the guy who founded is like, okay, we're going to be International Pro Insurance.
All right.
If you want to put that in front of me, put that brick in front of me, I'm going to jump over it. I'm going to put International in front of my name. And
so you moved to California.
So I moved to California, which was a big deal because I'd lived in Washington at that point for 39 years. We were willing to do it primarily because it was sunny. So we were technically in the Bay Area, but we were North Bay, so about 45 miles north. The weather's way better than in San Francisco, So in San Francisco, you get clouds. And
what else?
Sometimes sun.
Clouds.
Okay. And just kind of overcast or fog and like 60s. So it's not terrible, but it's not
great.
And so we took the leap. They paid to move us down there, and we definitely prayed about that one because my wife we're just not sure about California. It was way different than it is now, just like Seattle, and so it was a pretty big move.
What position did you take?
I took a COO role, and
that's Chief Operating
Officer. Okay. Yes, I was Chief Operating Officer over the whole company, but one of the business units was really the entities was really struggling, and turned out I learned there had been the pro forma that was built out was a little optimistic, and the financial situation that business unit was in wasn't exactly as advertised. When I finally got to see the financials,
were they public?
No, no. They were they're about $7 million in revenue at the time, and the benefits division was super profitable. Had been around for a long time. The commercial and personal hadn't been around as long. And like that next day after I started, they formed a joint venture with a real estate company, a real estate agency in the Bay Area, and so now we're spinning up this other business unit. We had one gal that we'd recruited. We had one gal on staff already, and one gal that we recruited the guy who recruited me had recruited to run that business unit. But speaking of just kind of God in that whole situation, moving to California, a guy who worked with me at Hub was not happy about me being cut loose, and he didn't know all the other stuff that had gone on. He actually introduced me, or sent my name to a lady that he knew in the Seattle area, who worked for a company that had offices around the U.S. She sent my name to a guy in Arizona, who then sent my name communicated that I was available to a gal in Baltimore, Maryland, who reached out one day when I was driving. I was actually driving to meet with one of my now former colleagues at Hub. And she's like, hey, what do you think about moving? Are you open to an opportunity in California? And I'm like, well, it wasn't actually on our list because an opportunity in Alaska had presented itself. And I'm like, oh, I'm not sure about Alaska.
Because that would have been so much better.
Yeah, it would have been bad. It would have been so bad. So, I said, yeah, I'm definitely open to it. I'll have a conversation. And that just started the path. But it was just that connected, that whole thing and how it connected. But when we moved out there, we didn't know a soul. We didn't know anybody. The only person I knew was the people I'd interviewed with. and ended up getting involved in a Calvary Chapel for the first time there in Petaluma. Met some great people, but I felt a lot of performance pressure because here I'd moved my family down there. First time ever in my career, I think, that I felt that sort of pressure. Like I was second guessing all my decisions. If I made a mistake, I was really hard on myself. I remember standing in the kitchen like 3 months in, I'm going, man, I don't know if I made the right choice here. And I had been through fire. Like I'd been through all kinds of stuff. I knew this business really, really well. I wasn't making any big mistakes, but like if, be like a conversation and maybe we didn't agree or something, me and the guy who was the president, we had a good relationship, but I was just like really feeling this massive pressure just because of moving. And eventually I got over that, but moving down there, like the pace was crazy. So I ended up working a lot of hours. Things had settled down a little bit that last year at Hub. And, but down there I ended up working a lot and dealing with stuff, and it just got, progressive. And I went through like kind of I would call it like a 6 or 7 year time period where I was kind of I felt like I was largely going through the motions. I'd go to church. I was still being a good example. I would still, there were opportunities that came up to minister to people in the work setting, just where people would come to me asking questions, or they had a life situation. But I felt like for the most part, I was kind of going through the motions. Go to the home fellowship group. Just like you said, you just get into this habit, you know. And this guy, so we ended up leaving Calvary Chapel Petaluma for some plagiarism and kind of spiritual kind of abuse sort of stuff that was impacting some of our friends. And we finally got to the point where, you know what, it's time to go. So we ended up going to a Calvary Chapel in Santa Rosa. The pastor Ross Ryman, was gone. He actually he died of cancer 2 weeks ago. But he was gone one Sunday, and he had this guy, Pastor Bobby. Like, usually guys named Bobby are from the South. Yeah. But this guy was from like Modesto. I guess that maybe they have Bobbies in the valley, in the Central Valley in California. But Pastor Bobby comes, and I can remember like the church was a rectangle, and we always, for the most part, would sit on the left side. And I remember it was like yesterday. He's preaching this sermon, and he's like, "Are you worried about your 401k? Are you working doing it?" Like, he hit me like I was like a boxer, just boom, boom, taking these blows. He hit like 5 just core points. He had 5 points to his sermon, and every one of them was just like a blow to the head or the body. And I was like, ugh, dude. By the time he was done, we were singing. Normally, we didn't sing a lot of hymns. We were singing a hymn, and I was like tears rolling down my eyes. I'm like, you just have put this work stuff and all this for the last 6-7 years, and just going through the motions, making money. I made a lot of money. And but I was tired. I was falling asleep on the couch some of that time at like 8 o'clock, and just wasn't there the relationship wise. And so really started getting intentional more about prayer. And I would pray on my drive down and pray the full armor of God every day. And it was really pretty cool, actually, because during that time, I'd gotten recruited a number of times during my time down there. Like one time was a couple years after I got down there, and I was like went through this process. I like to do the interviews just because it kept me fresh if I ever needed a job. And one day I got close, and they wanted to fly me out to Boston, and I just knew my wife wasn't going to be willing to move again, like to San Mateo. And so, but this company who had actually recruited a number of people away from us, they came calling for me, and they wanted me to be like, they wanted me to lead their commercial practice, which kind of would have been, it might have been technically a step up in some respects, but it was really a step down, because by that time I was the COO and the CFO, after the first year, I'd taken on the CFO role.
I thought you just said that being the CFO and the COO at the same time was silly.
Well, in that scenario, when we were $18 million in revenue and about to do a $5 million acquisition, and we're going to continue to do more, that business ended up growing to probably, my guess is probably somewhere around 70 million plus. So it made no sense at that point. No. But when in our scenario where we were at that time, probably about 8 million in revenue, we had grown. They didn't have anybody really filling that role. They had an office in a company down in Georgia that was an agency where we were in their system, and they were handling our accounting, and they had a gal working out of her house out in, I can't remember the name of the town, out 84. I actually went to her house, and she was burning DVDs to give out and mailing them to the guys with the financial reports from QuickBooks Desktop. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. They're like, "Hey, can you bring that in house?" Oh yeah, sure. So I go meet. I had no idea what they were doing. I just knew their P&L was terrible. Credit card, they had a line item, credit card expense. Well, shoot, 75% of the expenses that weren't payroll and employee benefit costs were credit cards. And we had no idea where the money was going other than credit card. Anyway, so so it just made sense to bring it together, and then even as we scaled, I ultimately had a director of finance and a director of HR. But so I can't remember what year it was. It was probably 2018, 2019, one of those two. This sermon had been preached. I got this call. They wanted to interview. I went down and interviewed with this guy named, I can't remember that guy's name, but the guy, so I interviewed with him. He liked me, and he's like, "Hey, I'd like you to meet with this Tom Whiteknight." I'm like, "What a name, Whiteknight. He must be cool." I didn't really love the guy I interviewed with. He was really arrogant, and he actually said I'm kind of an a-hole to work for. I'm like,
great start.
Are you trying to recruit me? Are you trying to get me to not take this job? And so he asked me to meet with this guy, and I'm like, okay, I want to meet with him. I'll meet with him. I was going to give it one more shot. I wasn't really super crazy interested in it, but I was kind of getting tired of where I was at, just some stuff. And I remember I was driving down there, and I was praying the full armor of God, did that, and then I said, "Lord, you know what? If you want me to take this job or want me to continue this process, have him show up. If you don't want me to continue this process, don't have him show up." And so we were meeting at a Starbucks downtown San Francisco. Got to park in the parking garage, which is never fun down there. So I'm sitting there, and it's like 5 minutes go by, 9 minutes go by. Like, I don't know if he emailed me instead of like texting or calling. He's like, "Hey, I'm in a client meeting. I'm going to be like at least 15 minutes late. Probably best for us to reschedule." And I'm like, sounds like an answer to prayer. So I remember calling him and just telling him, or emailing the guy that I'd interviewed with the first time. Or actually, no, I think I messaged Tom, and then I emailed the other guy and said, "Hey, I just don't think this is the right opportunity for me." And ended up being a really good decision. But it was just, it was just a testament for me, because I feel like I'd gone through so many years where God and I were, close or distant, but more distant. But I was still, living my faith, but not really living with faith and not walking close with God.
I also think that you exercised, and not just faith generally speaking, but you exercised specific faith in that with a more specific prayer.
Yeah.
Not that we're going to get an answer to our specific prayer, but maybe if we get creative like you didn't, and maybe that was even an impression almost that that was going to end up. God knew it was going to work for you if you asked it this way. And you recognized the answer.
And my mom was, we didn't talk about it much. My mom was super instrumental in my faith, and just she was just such a good example throughout. Because my mom and dad never would have been stayed married if my mom hadn't become a Christian. And they ended up married over 50 years, and it was not always easy for her. It was really hard, but for a good chunk of that time. But my mom would always talk about putting out a fleece, because I can't remember where it is in the Old Testament, but we put a fleece out. Maybe it's, and basically put a fleece out, and if it's wet underneath, then go. If it's not, then and so it's kind of like that. You learn that, but yeah, it was just really cool. There was another example, I can't think of it, where in that same period of time where just really saw God's presence and movement.
Where did so obviously California, where did Up Advisors come from?
So I got to the point where I was getting kind of tired. I'd taken on the CEO role. It was about, 18 months into that, and we were managing another company. So now this firm that I'd started with, it was $7 million. We were about $23 million including managing this other company. And then I decided I was going to merge them together, just because it made sense. We're going to generate.
Did you get equity in this company?
Yeah. So we sold our interest, and then I took on the CEO role because their whole structure was just leave you alone. But so I got equity. I originally got equity. I became a minority owner when it was private, and I bought in 15, and then ultimately we sold it in 17. So about 2.5 years later. The original plan was hold it for 10 years. So I wouldn't have probably gotten out if we hadn't sold it. But I took on the CEO role and had equity in this company that bought us. And then got more when they asked us to manage this other company. They gave us equity in this crazy bonus plan. It was I was getting 2 salaries, a salary for running the one, plus I had a guaranteed bonus, which I negotiated when I took on the CEO role. Also, we had an earn out, so I had a portion I was going to get from that. And then we took over managing this other one. They're paying us a salary that 2 other guys and I were sharing, and we had this bonus plan that we could earn every year. It was ridiculous, but it was also a lot of work. And I was driving to San Jose. During my time down, the first 3-4 years, I was driving to Menlo Park once a week, which is 70 miles, but it goes through all these cities. It's not like driving 70 miles here.
No, not at all.
It was crazy. And then they finally you know what? You don't need to go every week if you don't want to. Well, then we take on management of this company, and I need to show my face in San Jose once a week, which is now 90 miles. So I'm getting up at 5:30 in the morning, driving to San Jose. I got I'm going to drive in the morning, but I'm leaving by 2:00 because I am not going to be in traffic. That got kind of old, but so I just kind of got to the point where I was ready for a change, and my wife Heather really wanted to move to Idaho. She'd wanted to move for about 5 years, and
God's country.
Huh? Yeah. God's country. Yeah. So I was watching. As far as where Up Advisors came from, the real impetus for it was I had watched the show The Prophet on CNBC. Marcus Lemonis. He's the CEO of Camping World. Grew that business, became a billionaire. And so he would go in and buy. He'd go in. People would write into the show and say, "Hey, we need help with our business. We need an investment. We're struggling." So he would come in, figure out what's going on, and then write him a check. And I'm like, I don't want to write checks because I don't have $1 billion or a TV show backing me up. But I do want to go in and help. And his deal was people, process, product, I think was his. Or people, product, process. And so I was like, that's what I want to do and I'd thought about this for years. I'd watched this show for years. And also was a big fan of Undercover Boss and just kind of how.
Yeah.
So kind of those 2 shows are probably the impetus for it. And then we're going to move to Idaho. I'm like, well, I'm not going to look for an insurance job. I'm going to start my own consulting and coaching business. Didn't matter that I didn't know a soul really in Idaho. We knew a couple people, but not anybody that we were close with. that had moved over here. And so original plan was I told the former owners who are now the board that I reported to as the CEO, I said, like, guys, I'm going to get out. I told them that in October. I think it's probably going to be, my plan is let's merge the two firms together. I'll complete that merger because nobody else had any experience doing it. So I had a couple of key people, one guy was now in a COO kind of role, and the other, the director of ops or finance and HR, a gal that I'd helped develop. And so we merged. So I was going to do that. Well, then February of 2020. So we put an offer on a house, went into contract. We're going to sell our house in California, and COVID hit. So now, like 3 weeks after that, I have everybody working from home. We had a lot of people remote anyways, and then we had a lot of people that had the ability to work from home. So we get everybody set up working from home, and just continued to work through the merger, and save the company, I don't know, $1.2 million, $1.4 million. Can't remember. It was pretty crazy. We ended up cutting people and cutting other expenses, just duplication stuff, like it's typical in those sort of situations. And but now, July rolls around, the merger's complete, or I should say end of June rolls around. I'm like, and now we'd sold our house. It's kind of an interesting story with that, but we sold our house and we were living in an Airbnb for 2 months because we didn't know what was going to happen with my son's school. I'm like, well, I'm just going to move to Idaho because I'm not going to keep staying in an Airbnb. And I originally planned was to be done July 1st. I was going to take 4 months off, July 1st, 2020, and then I was going to start Up Advisors and just see what happened. If it didn't work out, then I would go find an insurance job. And so I ended up, because of it would have been super disruptive for me to leave. Nobody really knew I was there anyways until August. So I moved at the end of June, and I finally told one of the guys that was on the board, like, hey, I moved. He's like, oh, that's awesome. I was thinking about moving there too because of the way things are going in California with COVID. And I was entitled to a bonus as part of this whole management structure of this other company that's now merged in with us. It wasn't going to be paid till February. And so COVID enabled me to continue to get paid, and then get that bonus. And then it ended up being end of June of 21 is when I said, I'm out. And I took 3 months off and then formed Up Advisors, and ended up with a couple of referrals for clients right out of the gate. God definitely provided those. One guy had done he was the nephew of the founder of the company in California, and he'd asked me to help him while I was still working there, help him with some issues he was having. And he messaged me the week before I launched saying, hey, I had told him I was going to leave and go start this consulting thing. He's like, hey, are you still going to do that consulting thing? I said, yep. He said, well, I'm going to be your first customer. So, and then another relative of his son, a half sister, needed help, so this guy referred me. Another guy that was a business partner referred me her, and that was my second client, and then just kind of went from there. Yeah.
What are you at now? Just out of curiosity.
Where am I at now?
In 3 years.
Yeah. How many clients do you have, and what are you charging each client?
Just kidding.
Yeah, Scott says that because he's one of my clients, but I didn't just turn that off, did I?
No, you're good.
I hit the wire again. Yeah, so it was a pretty wild ride. I've served approaching 150 clients now. I typically have 25 to 35 at any one time. It runs across the sectors, so anything from the trades like Boise Siding to I've worked with a law firm, marketing firms, accounting firms, because what I established from my Marcus Lemonis watching days and the profit was people, process, product, profit, and customer experience, 5 buckets of business. And what I found is that those buckets exist in every business. There's so many similarities. So I didn't have to just niche. I didn't want to just niche. I also didn't want to do insurance, so I didn't focus on insurance at all. Totally counterintuitive, but over the course of time, just meeting people, Scott's been a great referral source as well as a great client, and you start getting referrals, and I networked like a madman. I never had to network in my life. I got a brick of business cards. I show new clients. I'm like, this is, if you're going to get out and network, this is what it looks like. And so the combination of those two, and then also just, it resonates, the relationships you build resonates with people. And I've found that there's been opportunities to share my faith in a thoughtful way, not pushing it on people. Because even though I now own the company, I can take whatever risks I want with it. I can say what I want.
Let's get clear on you're not a very risky person.
Yeah, I'm fairly conservative. I launched, even though I had that entrepreneurial.
And that's why he's a great advisor.
Even that entrepreneurial, experience as a kid, like it didn't translate as an adult into going and starting a business right away. Mm-hmm. I got to the point where I felt like I was financially in a position where I could take the risk. And then it was a pretty big leap for me at that point, 26 years in different business roles and leadership roles and all that, to just go, and not ever having to really sell, to now I'm in sales and I'm consulting and I don't know anybody here. So it was pretty crazy, but it's been a really good experience. Except, one of the things that happened is, like, I'm a worker. Like, I get after it and I commit, and if that means 5 a.m., I'm up at 5 a.m. That first client, I did a call at 5:30 in the morning on Thanksgiving with him. He just really wanted to meet. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what did I get myself into here? But like last year, so the business has continued to grow. I hit 220% of my first year goal. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? Maybe my goal wasn't that big, but it was actually, pretty good. Because there's one guy here told me through network, he's like, you can't make more than $60,000 a year as a coach or a consultant in Idaho. I'm like, well, that's funny, because I did like 3 times that last year. Mm-hmm. Not quite. Anyway, so I was growing it, but last year, the whole year, but really the third and fourth quarter, and then rolled into the first quarter, I was kind of back to where I was in California when that sermon from Pastor Bobby whacked me. I was just tired. This was end of March of this year. I was just tired. And it was like, all this business had come in, and I had this crazy, like, my best month by a crazy March. And I think it was February, it was March actually. And I was like, this is not working. Like, I'm not getting as much sleep as I should get. I had an assistant that was helping, but like the business had just flowed in. And I ended up bringing on a guy as a part-time consultant. But I had met a guy, so I've been part of, like, before I launched the business, an organization called the Faith Driven Entrepreneur. The idea was that, there's a lot of ministry that can be done in the workplace. In fact, you get more access to people than you get out, in the community, right, for the most part. And so through that, I had ended up leading a group in 22, and I met a guy named Andrew Nemmer. Well, I hadn't really stayed connected to Andrew, really, or any of the other people in that group, because they were all over the place. But he was in Meridian, and we just never ended up meeting because it was on Zoom. And he reached out to me in July of last year, June or July, and he's like, hey, be great to meet in person. I'm doing some stuff. Love to tell you about it. So it turned out he was doing coaching on rest and just resting in Christ and learning how to do that. And he had gone through, he's a professional tap dancer, trained under like Gregory Hines and the whole deal. And
we know who that is.
Do you know who Gregory Hines is?
No.
You don't?
But I'm going to YouTube him.
Yeah, you got to look him up. Yeah, Gregory Hines. He's probably the most famous tap dance performer guy. And so he trained under him, but he was running a nonprofit and then doing the performances, and he was like 80 hours a week and just grinding. And he was tired, just wore him out. And he went through this journey. He read a fair amount of books by Dallas Willard, one of them being like the spirit of the disciplines. And so, yeah, I just, I was like, he's telling me about it anyway. So fast forward to end of March, first week of April, I was like, this isn't working. I'm tired. I know I can bring in people and help and all that, but I'm just tired, and my relationship with God isn't where it needs to be. And so I remembered Andrew. I said, I'm going to message Andrew. So I reached out to Andrew, set up a call, and we sat down, or we did a Zoom call. He was still doing the coaching. I said, hey, this is where I'm at. He's like, hey, yeah, I could definitely help you. This is what it looks like, and 8 to 10 weeks typically. And I said, okay, well, let me think on it for a week or so, and I'll get back to you. So,
are you doing good on time?
Yeah, what time is it?
11:30.
Yeah.
Okay. I do have a question.
It's a long podcast. Somebody's talking too much. You gotta slow me down.
I'm listening.
No, it's good. Good. I have a question in the I think we all kind of fall into that, when we set our mind to. I mean, we talked about it this morning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how it's like,
yeah.
I'm not a think about it planner. I am just a go,
yeah.
right? So especially in the consulting world, how are you still maintaining because you personally can only do so much, right? How can you maintain, a positive family life, a good church life, and still maintain enough funds, especially while doing a quality job for people?
Yeah. Well, that was the challenge, because I was getting so much work,
right,
that it wasn't, the balance was off. And so I had to, I felt like I was doing a decent job. Well, my wife.
Did you fire any clients?
Not during that time. No, I fired. The previous year, around that time, I'd fired my number one client, the person I'd generated more revenue than anybody by a pretty wide margin. And it was just because there wasn't alignment anymore. So they weren't taking the advice, and they were hurting their business by not taking the advice. I'm like, I can't do this. And but they had consumed a lot of my time too. I mean, I still had 20 some clients at the time, but she was consuming an enormous amount of my time. Great person, but it just wasn't, sometimes it's not going to work. And so I didn't have that balance. And so I told Andrew a week, and I messaged him the next day. I said, let's get started. And we started talking about rest. And I started reading this book that this David or John Mark Comer. John Mark Comer. He's a pastor of a church in downtown Portland. It's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. It's another orange book. Well, red. Depends on what. That one's definitely orange. That was definitely orange. And it just really, started reading that, and was working with Andrew, and he was talking about just rest, and how do you rest in God, and then also how do you relate with God? What does that relationship look like? And I feel like growing up in the church, it was like, you need to do your quiet time, and you memorize scripture, you need to pray, and you need to do it every day, and it should be the first thing in the morning. And it was made to be kind of this rote thing that you do, like you just fit it into your schedule. And he just had a different perspective on it. He's like, you should be able, drive down the road having a conversation with God, admiring the beauty. My other thing is, I grew up with noise. The TV was always on. If the TV wasn't on and we were working on something, or I was painting with my dad, doing a side job on the weekend or something, the radio was always on. In the car, radio was always on. There was never quiet in our house unless they were gone. And then I got used to it. So I grew up and then spent all my years so I get in the car, I listen to the radio. I get up in the morning, I would be looking at the clock to see what time it was, so I was already hurrying.
Right.
And through reading the book and then just thinking about rest, and this book wasn't even recommended by Andrew, but it just seemed natural. And I realized, I'd go up, it's like, hey, when you pull up to a light, or you're pulling up to a traffic light, do you move into the lane that's got the fewest cars? Or
yes.
And so I realized that. Yeah. And then I was like, I was in Walmart, and I'm riding. I'm got the cart, and it was slow, and it was the people. It kind of backed up, and I'm like, I go into the other side, and I'm going down the other side against traffic because the way Walmart set up some of their aisles, so they have stuff in all their aisles and all that. I'm like, what are you doing? And I was driving to this other place, and I realized I'm making this lane change. I'm going to be 10 minutes early for a 7:30 appointment at DBAT. It's taking Abby, my daughter. I'm like, what are you doing? Like every time I get out of something, it was just like I was on this wheel. And so it's been a process over the last couple of months of I slowed down. Like I wasn't doing as much sales outreach, prospect outreach. I'm just like, I'm going to make a couple calls a week here and there, but I just slowed it down. And I'm like, you got to figure this out. Stop doing 7 a.m. calls, except I do one with Scott and one other guy.
Wow.
I'm not doing 7 a.m. calls anymore. And just really working through this how to relate to God and have just a totally different sort of relationship, and then also figuring out how to find rest. And I'm still on the journey. We were just talking on Friday about like ending the day, because my natural thing is I end the day, I go sit down in the chair and I start watching TV. Well, I don't want to do that so much anymore. And so we were just talking about kind of how do you change that? Same thing in business. Like you can't change a million things at one time. James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, it's kind of like 1% change. And so that's what I'm working through.
What are you seeing as far as like, you don't have to be specific at all, and I don't expect you to, but like, what are maybe like 3 things that you're seeing as far as small businesses and what they can do better to essentially grow, or I guess reach their goals?
Yeah. Well, you've heard this from me so many times, but knowing your numbers and using the information to help you make good business decisions. So
and elaborating on knowing your numbers isn't just checking your bank account every day.
Not checking your bank account. So having a P&L that's, you got your cost of goods sold broken out so we know what the gross margin is, having all your expenses categorized, maintaining working capital. So how much working capital do you actually have? There's those dollars that you have to either invest in the business or support your business if something slows down or there's a change.
And would that be more considered, in your opinion, cash or available credit?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. So I encourage almost all of my clients to have a business line of credit. Not that you're tapping it, but to make it available, because then if the pressure comes or things slow down for a minute, you're not making drastic decisions, cutting all your staff and all that. You have some cash now. If your sales engine is weak, then you may need to cut the staff. But if it's just a dip, we don't want to have to break the business apart for a dip. And then the other thing is, one of those things is sales engine. Talk about that so much more than I did in the beginning, but you got to have your sales engine always running. Even for me, I didn't stop making any calls. I just slowed down because I needed to at that point in time. Now I've started to ramp back up more, but and I didn't stop networking either. So you got to have that sales and marketing engine running, and have the right strategy in doing that. The other thing is being real clear on where you want to go. It doesn't mean you're going to get just to that. You may get well beyond it. You may end up going a different direction, but getting clear on where you want to go and then setting objectives to make that a reality. The other one would be hire the right people. From our conversations about people, you've hired some good people, you've hired some people that are not so good. But if you can get a really strong right-hand person, sometimes that starts with like hiring an assistant. Sometimes it's like a lead or a foreman. That's what it's going to take if you're small to elevate yourself. Because as a leader, you should be delegating and elevating yourself to get to the point where ultimately you're free to do what you enjoy doing most in the business. So, and what you do best. Not always what you do best. It may be what you enjoy most, because what you do best may not be what you enjoy most. Right. And so, but really getting to that point where you're free to either do what you do best or free to let the team run the business. When I was the last role with Pro Insurance, which ultimately we changed the name to Proco.
International Proco?
No, we killed it didn't say insurance, so it was still International Pro Insurance, kind of doing business as Proco, because we still had to have maintain a license. But and we got to the point where like we had such a great team that like the founder, he would leave for 6 months at a time, and the other guys could have confidence to be away because we just had built a really strong team. And so when you get to that point, then you're free. You're free to go start another business. You're free to spend time with your family. You're free to travel more. And that's the number one thing I hear from business owners when I have initial conversations is, I want to build a business where I can be an absentee owner. I want to be a business where I'm free to go do other stuff. I want to build a business where I'm just the chairman.
I want to be lazy.
I want to build a business that runs itself, is what I hear.
Yeah.
And so I call that freedom. And so that's why I'm working through building out a business freedom mastery program, which ideally will help me do less, be able to do less one-on-one consulting, or having to scale the one-on-one, what I call custom consulting, and have more people in this sort of program where I can bring in other coaches and consultants to help. So,
yeah. Would you agree that people are always the main focus?
In my consulting?
No, in business, just in business in general. And let me preface that with like, it can't necessarily be about the money, and that's kind of what I mean by that is like, and I'm looking at it more as like in a sales force, like people buy people, they don't buy product, right? Yeah. And so in the same thing with business, right? Even you said you've built a team that the owner can go away for 6 months and have 100%. So would you consider, I guess, business be focused more? I know obviously they have to have some sort of financial backing. Yeah. But the business needs to be focused more on the people than chasing the money.
Yeah, I think for the most part, yeah. I think, it's all 5 of those buckets have to be working together. But if you don't have good people, it's going to be a problem. If you don't have the right people, it's going to be a problem. If you're not getting the time value exchange, it's going to be a problem. Right. If you don't have the right finances, it doesn't matter how good of people you want to hire, it's going to be a problem. And so they all work together. But the people piece is definitely in the top 3, and it's a cornerstone. Like if you're constantly churning people because you're maybe a jerk or difficult to work for, you're not getting better, you're not growing, you're in control of everything, then it's gonna be a challenge. But once you do, if you are able to get those right people, you still got to maintain the relationships. Right. And the sales side, definitely, people are buying people a lot. There's some places where people are buying product, they don't care, but so much. But they ultimately want somebody when things go awry. Right.
So where can people find you?
Yeah, so they can find me at myupadvisors.com. They can email me, renglish@myupadvisors.com.
We'll tag it.
Yeah, they can call me or text me, 208-565-6099.
You're putting that out
Not
there.
Not afraid to give out my phone number. I've done that a bunch. Nothing crazy's happened yet. Maybe it will. Who knows? But also find me on LinkedIn. I post quite a bit on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube.
Sweet.
So, yeah.
Well, thanks for coming. We close with a prayer. You can either do it, or Josh, do you want to do it? Who wants to do it?
Yeah. Yeah, I can do it.
Okay, either way, I'm fine.
Good deal. Our Father in heaven, we are grateful that we were able to come here together and gather as brothers in faith and be able to learn a great deal. We're grateful for the Spirit that's accompanied us, and give thee thanks for our Savior who has blessed us with his atoning sacrifice so that we can strive to always be better and strive to perfect ourselves through thee. And these things we pray for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.